What if I told you that the greatest tragedy in your life may not be failure, not heartbreak, not losing money, not even growing old? What if the greatest tragedy is something far more invisible? What if, at the end of your life, you discover that you never truly lived it? Take a moment and imagine this. Imagine yourself many years from now, sitting quietly by a window as the sun begins to set. The years have passed faster than you ever expected. The goals you chased are behind you. The worries that once kept you awake at night have faded into distant memories. And suddenly, one painful realization appears. You spent most of your life preparing to live, preparing to be happy, preparing to feel safe, preparing to enjoy yourself, but rarely allowing yourself to actually experience the moment you were living in. This realization is more common than most people think. Every day, millions of people wake up carrying invisible burdens. They rush through breakfast while thinking about work. They drive while worrying about bills. They spend time with people they love while mentally rehearsing tomorrow's problems. Their bodies are here, but their minds are somewhere else. And perhaps that is why so many people feel exhausted even when nothing is physically wrong. Because constantly living in the future is exhausting. Buddhism teaches a profound truth that most people overlook. The future is not where life happens. Life happens now, not tomorrow, not next year, not when everything is finally perfect. Now. Yet the mind constantly whispers another story. Just get through this week. Just solve this problem. Just reach this goal. Then you'll be happy. But have you noticed something strange? There is always another problem. Another goal, another reason to postpone peace. The finish line keeps moving, and many people spend decades running toward a future that never arrives. A young woman named Emily learned this lesson in a way she never expected. Since childhood, she had dreamed of visiting New York City. She imagined standing beneath the bright lights of Times Square, walking through Central Park, and feeling fully alive in one of the most exciting cities in the world. Finally, the day came. She stood in the middle of Manhattan, surrounded by energy, movement, and possibility. Yet, instead of feeling joy, she felt anxiety. Her mind was busy thinking about unfinished tasks waiting back home. Emails she hadn't answered. Deadlines coming next week. Problems that might happen next month. She had traveled hundreds of miles to experience a dream. Yet she was missing it completely. Because while her body stood in New York, her mind was trapped inside a future that did not exist. And that is exactly what worry does. It steals the present moment and replaces it with imagined futures. It convinces you that happiness must wait, that peace must wait, that life must wait. But Buddhism gently reminds us that this moment is the only place where life can ever be found. Not in the future, not in your fears, not in your plans, only here. Before we continue, if these teachings resonate with you and you enjoy exploring Buddhist wisdom, mindfulness, and inner peace, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that inspires and uplifts people around the world. And now, I have a question for you. Which statement feels more true about your life right now? A. I often find myself worrying about the future and missing the present moment. B. I'm learning to enjoy the present and trust life more each day. Comment A or B below. Your answer may reveal more about your happiness than you realize. The ancient Buddhist teachers often asked a simple question. How much of your suffering comes from what is happening? And how much comes from your refusal to let life unfold the way it already is? Most people never stop to consider this. They assume their anxiety comes from uncertainty itself. They believe their stress is caused by unexpected events, difficult people, or circumstances they did not choose. But if you look closely, you may discover something surprising. The real source of suffering is often not uncertainty. It is the desperate attempt to eliminate uncertainty. It is the exhausting effort to control things that were never meant to be controlled. Many of us spend our lives trying to manage every possible outcome. We plan conversations before they happen. We imagine every future scenario. We replay mistakes from the past as if we could somehow rewrite them. We constantly monitor the people around us, hoping to predict their reactions, their decisions, and their feelings. We do all of this because control feels safe, or at least it appears to. But beneath that desire for control is usually something much deeper. Fear. The fear of being hurt. The fear of failing. The fear of loss. The fear of not knowing what comes next. Daniel understood this fear better than most. For years, he built his life around certainty. He carefully planned every step of his career. He set goals years in advance. He believed that if he worked hard enough and prepared well enough, life would reward him with security. And for a while, it seemed to work. Everything was moving according to plan. Then one unexpected change inside his company altered everything. A restructuring decision made by people he had never even met suddenly erased the future he had spent years building. The promotion he expected disappeared. The path he trusted vanished, and with it came anger, confusion, and disappointment. At first, Daniel blamed the situation, but over time, he began to realize something important. His deepest pain was not caused by the change itself. His deepest pain came from the fact that reality refused to obey the story he had written in his mind. That realization changed him, because he finally saw something many people never see. Life is not a machine. Life is a river. You can choose how you navigate it. You can choose your direction. You can choose your attitude, but you cannot control every current. You cannot command the water. You cannot demand that the river flow exactly where you want. The more you fight the current, the more exhausted you become. Buddhism teaches that wisdom is not found in controlling life. Wisdom is found in learning how to move with it. This does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean giving up on your goals. It does not mean accepting less than you deserve. It means understanding the difference between what belongs to you and what does not. Your effort belongs to you. Your integrity belongs to you. Your choices belong to you. But outcomes are influenced by countless forces beyond your control. The weather, the economy, other people, timing, chance, life itself. When you stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world, something remarkable begins to happen. Your shoulders become lighter. Your breathing becomes deeper. Your mind becomes quieter. You no longer feel responsible for carrying the weight of the entire future. Instead, you focus on what can actually be done today. This moment, this choice, this step. Perhaps that is one of the most liberating truths Buddhism offers. Peace does not come from controlling everything. Peace comes from realizing that you never needed to. The river was always moving. The question was never whether you could control it. The question was whether you could learn to trust it. There is a quiet voice that follows you almost everywhere. It speaks when you wake up in the morning. It speaks when you lie awake at night. It speaks during moments of uncertainty, disappointment, and fear. Most of the time, you don't even notice it, because after listening to it for so many years, you have begun to mistake its voice for your own. Buddhism teaches a truth that can completely transform the way you experience life. You are not every thought that enters your mind. This may sound simple at first, but if you truly understand it, it can free you from an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering. Many people live as prisoners of their thoughts without realizing it. A thought appears, they believe it. A fear arises, they accept it as truth. A doubt enters the mind. They immediately begin building their lives around it. The thought itself is often harmless. What creates suffering is the unquestioned belief that every thought deserves attention, agreement, and emotional investment. Emily experienced this one ordinary afternoon. She was sitting in a coffee shop, enjoying a rare moment of calm, when her phone vibrated. A message from her manager appeared on the screen. "Can we talk tomorrow morning?" That was all. No explanation, no details, no indication that anything was wrong. Yet within seconds, her mind began constructing an entire story. Maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe she was losing her position. Maybe someone had complained about her work. Maybe her future was about to collapse. By the time she arrived home, she felt anxious, exhausted, and emotionally drained. Nothing had actually happened. No crisis existed, no problem had been confirmed. The only thing that had changed was the story unfolding inside her mind. How often does this happen to us? One small thought enters, then another follows, and another. Soon, we are no longer responding to reality. We are responding to an imaginary world created by our own thinking. The mind is remarkably creative, but it is not always accurate. It can generate fears that never happen, predictions that never come true, worst-case scenarios that exist only in imagination. Yet we suffer as if those stories are real. This is why Buddhist practice places such importance on awareness, not because thoughts are bad, but because thoughts are temporary. Daniel discovered this during a meditation retreat he attended after the upheaval in his career. For months, his mind had repeated the same painful messages. You failed. You'll never recover. Your best years are behind you. At first, he fought those thoughts. He argued with them. He tried to silence them. But the harder he resisted, the louder they seemed to become. Then one teacher shared an image he never forgot. The teacher said, "Imagine sitting beside a busy highway. Cars are constantly passing. Some are beautiful. Some are noisy. Some are unpleasant. But you do not chase every car. You simply watch them pass. The same is true of thoughts. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every thought deserves your belief. And certainly, not every thought deserves control over your emotions." When Daniel began observing his thoughts instead of obeying them, something remarkable happened. The thoughts continued to appear, but they no longer controlled him. He started seeing them for what they truly were: temporary mental events. Nothing more, nothing less. Perhaps one of the greatest forms of freedom is realizing that awareness and thought are not the same thing. You are the one noticing the thought. You are not the thought itself. And the moment you stop treating every fearful idea as a command, your inner world begins to change. The mind may continue creating stories, but now you can smile gently and let them pass. Like clouds crossing the sky, like leaves floating down a river, like echoes fading into silence. And in that space between you and your thoughts, peace quietly begins to grow. One of the most convincing lies the mind tells is this: this feeling will never end. When sadness arrives, it feels permanent. When anxiety takes hold, it feels endless. When loneliness settles into the heart, it can seem as though it has always been there and always will be. In those moments, emotions do something powerful. They narrow our vision. They make it difficult to remember who we were before they arrived. They make it difficult to imagine a future beyond them. A difficult emotion can become so overwhelming that it begins to feel like an identity. Instead of saying, "I am experiencing sadness," we begin saying, "I am sin." Instead of saying, "Fear is visiting me right now," we begin believing, "I am a fearful person." Without realizing it, we fuse ourselves to temporary emotional experiences and treat them as permanent truths. Buddhism offers a different perspective. It teaches that everything in life is constantly changing. Not some things, everything. The weather changes, the seasons change, relationships change, circumstances change, the body changes, the mind changes, and emotions change too. Yet people often forget this when they are hurting. Daniel learned this lesson during one of the most difficult periods of his life. Months after his career plans had fallen apart, he traveled to the California coast, hoping to clear his mind. One evening, he found himself sitting alone near the Santa Monica Pier as the sun slowly disappeared into the horizon. The ocean stretched endlessly before him. Wave after wave rolled toward the shore. Some were large, some were small, some crashed loudly, others dissolved almost silently. As he watched them, he noticed something simple but profound. Not a single wave remained. No matter how powerful it appeared, every wave eventually returned to the ocean. And suddenly, he saw his emotions differently. For months, he had been treating anxiety as though it were a life sentence. He had been treating disappointment as though it defined him. He had been treating uncertainty as proof that something was wrong with his future. But sitting there beside the ocean, he realized that his emotions were behaving exactly like the waves before him. They arrived. They rose. They demanded attention. Then they passed. The problem was not that emotions existed. The problem was that he kept believing they would last forever. Many people suffer twice. First, from the emotion itself. Then from the fear that the emotion will never leave. The second layer of suffering is often the heavier burden. Fear of fear. Sadness about sadness. Anxiety about anxiety. This creates a cycle that can feel impossible to escape. But healing begins when we stop fighting our emotional experience and start understanding its nature. Imagine holding a frightened bird in your hands. If you squeeze too tightly, you harm it. If you panic, it panics. But if you remain calm and gentle, eventually it settles. Our emotions often respond in the same way. They do not need force. They do not need judgment. They do not need resistance. They need space. They need patience. They need understanding. Emily began discovering this in her own life as well. Whenever stress appeared, her first instinct had always been to push it away as quickly as possible. But over time, she learned to pause and simply sit with what she was feeling. Not to fix it, not to analyze it, not to escape it, just to allow it. And strangely, the emotions she stopped fighting often passed more quickly than the ones she tried to control. Perhaps that is because emotions are not obstacles on the path. They are part of the path. They are messengers carrying lessons about what matters to us, what hurts us, what heals us, and what needs our attention. The moment you stop treating your emotions as permanent conditions, you begin to reclaim your freedom. You realize that no feeling, no matter how intense, has the power to stay forever. The storm may be strong today, but storms move. The night may feel long, but dawn always comes. And just like the waves returning to the ocean, every emotion that visits your heart is already on its way to becoming something new. There is a question that quietly steals happiness from millions of people every day. It is not spoken out loud. Most people never even realize they are asking it. Yet it follows them through their careers, their relationships, their finances, and their dreams. The question is this: am I falling behind? For many people, life is no longer experienced directly. Instead, it is measured against friends, measured against co-workers, measured against strangers on social media, measured against impossible expectations created by a culture that constantly tells us we should be doing more, earning more, achieving more, and becoming more. No matter how much progress we make, someone always appears to be further ahead. And because of that, contentment becomes almost impossible. Buddhism teaches that comparison is one of the fastest ways to lose touch with your own life. The moment you begin comparing your path to someone else's, you stop seeing what is actually unfolding in front of you. Your attention shifts away from your blessings and becomes focused on what appears to be missing. Emily experienced this in a way that felt painfully familiar. One evening after work, she sat on her couch scrolling through social media. At first, she was simply passing time. Then she saw photos from an old college friend who had just purchased a beautiful home. A few moments later, another friend announced a major promotion. Then came engagement photos, vacation pictures, business successes, milestones, achievements, smiling faces, perfect moments. The longer she scrolled, the heavier she felt. Nothing in her own life had changed during those 30 minutes. Yet somehow she felt less successful than before, less accomplished, less fulfilled, less enough. This is the hidden danger of comparison. It creates suffering without changing reality. What changed was not Emily's life. What changed was the lens through which she viewed it. the mind has an unfortunate habit. It compares its private struggles to other people's public victories. It compares its behind-the-scenes reality to someone else's carefully edited highlights, and it almost always concludes that it is losing. But the truth is far more complicated. The smiling photo rarely shows the anxiety behind it. The promotion rarely shows the sacrifices required to achieve it. The beautiful relationship rarely reveals the difficult conversations, disappointments, and challenges that exist behind closed doors. Every person carries struggles that remain invisible. Daniel came to understand this after reconnecting with several former colleagues. For years, he had assumed they were all moving through life more successfully than he was. From the outside, their careers looked impressive. Their lives appeared stable. Their futures seemed secure. But when he spoke with them honestly, he discovered a different reality. One was struggling with burnout. Another was facing difficulties in a marriage. Someone else was battling loneliness despite professional success. Everyone carried burdens he could not see. And suddenly, the comparison lost much of its power. Because he realized he had never been comparing realities. He had been comparing appearances. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that every human being walks a unique path. Some lessons arrive early, others arrive later. Some people bloom at 25, others bloom at 55. Neither journey is wrong. The flower does not look at the tree and wonder why it grows differently. The river does not compare itself to the mountain. Nature simply becomes what it was meant to become. Perhaps we are meant to do the same. Emily eventually replaced comparison with a simple daily practice. Each evening, before going to sleep, she wrote down 3 things she appreciated about her life. Some days they were small, a meaningful conversation, a quiet walk, a moment of laughter. Other days they were larger. But over time, something remarkable happened. Her attention began shifting away from what she lacked and toward what she already possessed. And where attention goes, experience follows. The deepest happiness rarely comes from becoming someone else. It comes from fully becoming yourself. The moment you stop measuring your life against everyone else's timeline, you create space for something beautiful to emerge. Gratitude, peace, and the quiet understanding that your journey is unfolding exactly as it needs to. For many people, the hardest battle in life is not with the outside world. It is with themselves. No one sees it. No one hears it. Yet it happens every day. A mistake is made, and an inner voice immediately appears. You should have known better. Fear shows up, and the voice responds. Why are you so weak? Something goes wrong, and once again it speaks. You'll never get it right. Over time, this voice becomes so familiar that we stop questioning it. We assume it is helping us. We believe it is pushing us to improve. We tell ourselves that being hard on ourselves is necessary for growth. But Buddhism offers a radically different perspective. What if the voice that constantly criticizes you is not making you stronger? What if it is actually deepening your suffering? Many people spend years trying to defeat their fear. They fight it, judge it, suppress it. They treat fear like an enemy that must be conquered. Yet the more they fight it, the more exhausted they become. Because fear does not disappear through hostility. Fear softens through understanding. One evening, Emily found herself sitting alone in her apartment after an especially difficult week. Nothing dramatic had happened. There was no major crisis, yet she felt overwhelmed. Her mind was crowded with worries about the future, questions she could not answer, problems she could not solve, uncertainties she could not control. The familiar feeling of anxiety began rising inside her chest. Normally, she would have responded by distracting herself, watching something, scrolling through her phone, finding a way to escape the discomfort. But this time, she did something different. She sat quietly. She closed her eyes, and instead of pushing her fear away, she became curious about it. For the first time, she asked herself a simple question. What is this fear trying to protect me from? The answer surprised her. Beneath the anxiety was not weakness. It was vulnerability, a desire to be safe, a desire to be loved, a desire to avoid pain. In that moment, Emily realized something profound. The fearful part of her was not trying to destroy her life. It was trying, in its own imperfect way, to protect it. This realization changed everything. Because you cannot heal what you continue to hate. You cannot create inner peace while constantly attacking parts of yourself. Imagine a frightened child standing alone in the dark. Would you yell at that child for being afraid? Would you criticize them for trembling? Of course not. You would move closer. You would speak gently. You would offer reassurance. Yet many people treat themselves with a level of harshness they would never direct toward another human being. Daniel eventually discovered the same truth. For years after the collapse of his carefully planned career path, he blamed himself for every setback. He believed that self-criticism would somehow motivate him. Instead, it only deepened his anxiety. The turning point came when he began replacing judgment with compassion, not excuses, not avoidance. Compassion. There is a difference. Compassion does not say, "Nothing matters." Compassion says, "This is difficult, and I will support myself through it." Compassion does not deny responsibility. It simply removes unnecessary cruelty. This is one of the deepest teachings found within Buddhist wisdom. The relationship you build with yourself becomes the foundation for every other experience in your life. If your inner world is filled with judgment, life feels unsafe. If your inner world is filled with patience and understanding, life begins to feel different, softer, more manageable, more human. The truth is that fear may never disappear completely. There will always be moments of uncertainty, moments of doubt, moments when your heart feels vulnerable. But you no longer need to face those moments alone. You can become the calm presence that your fearful mind has been searching for all along. You can become the friend who listens instead of condemns, the voice that reassures instead of criticizes, the safe place that remains steady when everything else feels uncertain. And perhaps that is what true strength really is, not the absence of fear, but the ability to meet fear with kindness, again and again, until even the most frightened parts of yourself finally learn that they are safe. There is a promise that many people make to themselves without even realizing it. They say, "I will be happy when. I will be happy when I get the promotion. I will be happy when I earn more money. I will be happy when I find the right relationship. I will be happy when I finally feel secure." The details may change from person to person, but the pattern remains the same. Happiness is always waiting somewhere in the future, just beyond the next achievement, just beyond the next milestone, just beyond the next problem. And so life becomes an endless chase, a horizon that keeps moving farther away no matter how much progress is made. Buddhism invites us to consider a possibility that is both simple and profound. What if happiness was never meant to be a destination? What if happiness is something we practice? What if joy is not a reward waiting at the end of the journey, but a way of walking the journey itself? This understanding slowly began to transform both Emily and Daniel. Neither of their lives had become perfect. Emily still faced uncertainty. Daniel still encountered unexpected challenges. Difficult days still appeared. Disappointments still happened. There were still moments when fear visited, when plans changed, and when life felt complicated. But something fundamental had shifted. They stopped making happiness dependent on conditions they could not fully control. For years, Emily believed that peace would arrive after everything in her life was finally organized and resolved. But she eventually discovered that there would always be something unfinished. Another responsibility, another goal, another uncertainty. Life was never going to present her with a perfect moment and announce, "Now you may finally relax." That moment had to be created from within. Daniel came to a similar realization. After spending so much of his life chasing future success, he began noticing how many beautiful moments had quietly passed by unnoticed. A sunrise he barely looked at, because he was thinking about work. Conversations he rushed through because he was focused on the next task. Weekends he failed to enjoy because he was mentally living in Monday. He realized that happiness had not been absent from his life. His attention had been absent from happiness. This is one of the most powerful insights found within Buddhist wisdom. Joy is often much quieter than we expect. Many people are searching for extraordinary experiences while overlooking ordinary miracles. The warmth of sunlight through a window, the comfort of a deep breath, the sound of rain falling outside, a genuine smile from a stranger, a peaceful moment of silence before the world becomes busy. These moments seem small, yet when woven together, they become the fabric of a meaningful life. Happiness does not always arrive as excitement. Sometimes it arrives as presence. Sometimes it arrives as gratitude. Sometimes it arrives as the simple realization that this moment, imperfect as it may be, is enough. Over time, Daniel developed a small daily ritual. Each morning, before reaching for his phone, he paused and noticed one thing he appreciated. Each evening, he reflected on one moment that brought him peace. Emily began doing something similar. She intentionally looked for small moments of beauty throughout her day, not because her life was perfect, but because she no longer wanted to postpone joy. And slowly, both of them discovered something remarkable. The more they practiced happiness, the more available it became. Not because life changed, because their relationship with life changed. Perhaps that is the lesson many of us spend years trying to learn. You do not need to earn happiness. You do not need to wait for permission to feel peace. You do not need every problem solved before you allow yourself to experience joy. Life will always contain uncertainty. It will always contain change. It will always contain unfinished chapters. But happiness was never hiding at the end of the story. It has always been quietly waiting within the life that is unfolding right now. And the moment you stop postponing it, you begin to discover that happiness is not something you achieve. It is something you practice, day by day, moment by moment, breath by breath. As we reach the end of Emily and Daniel's journey, it becomes clear that their greatest transformation did not come from changing the world around them. It came from changing the way they related to their own minds. At the beginning of their stories, both of them were searching for peace in places where peace could never truly be found. Emily believed that happiness would arrive someday in the future. She thought she needed more certainty, more control, and fewer problems before she could finally relax and enjoy her life. Yet, even while standing in the middle of experiences she had dreamed about for years, her mind remained trapped somewhere else. She was physically present, but emotionally absent. Daniel faced a different struggle. He built his life around plans, expectations, and carefully designed outcomes. He believed that security could be achieved if he simply worked hard enough and controlled enough variables. But when life unexpectedly changed direction, he discovered that no amount of planning could protect him from uncertainty. What both of them eventually learned is one of the deepest truths found in Buddhist wisdom. Suffering often begins when we argue with reality. It grows when we try to control what cannot be controlled. It grows when we believe every fearful thought. It grows when we treat temporary emotions as permanent conditions. It grows when we compare our lives to the lives of others. And perhaps most painfully, it grows when we become enemies to ourselves. But as Emily and Daniel slowly learned to become more present, more compassionate, and more accepting of life as it is, something remarkable happened. The world around them did not suddenly become perfect. Challenges still appeared. Unexpected events still happened. Difficult emotions still visited from time to time. But those experiences no longer controlled their inner peace. Because true peace was never dependent on perfect circumstances. It was dependent on awareness. It was dependent on acceptance. It was dependent on learning how to meet life with wisdom rather than fear. And this lesson applies to all of us. Many people watching today may be carrying worries about the future. You may be waiting for answers. You may be facing uncertainty. You may be struggling with anxiety, disappointment, or self-doubt. If so, remember this. You do not need to solve your entire future today. You do not need to have all the answers right now. You do not need to become a different person before you deserve peace. Start with one breath, one moment of awareness, one act of self-compassion, one decision to stop fighting reality and begin working with it. Over time, those small choices create a completely different life. Not because your circumstances become perfect, but because your relationship with life becomes healthier, calmer, and more grounded. The deepest lesson from this story is simple. Happiness is not something waiting for you at the end of your journey. It is something available to you during the journey itself. The moment you stop chasing peace and start practicing it, you begin to realize that what you were searching for was never far away. It was quietly waiting inside this moment all along. Before we finish, here's a question for you. Which lesson from today's story resonates with you the most? A. Letting go of control and trusting life more. B. Being kinder to yourself and practicing self-compassion. Comment A or B below and let us know your answer. And beyond that, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Emily and Daniel's journey felt most similar to your own life? What lesson, are you currently trying to practice? Share your experience in the comments so others can learn from your perspective as well. Sometimes a single comment can encourage someone who is struggling in silence. If you enjoyed this video and want more stories about Buddhist wisdom, mindfulness, inner peace, and emotional healing, please subscribe to the channel and support our work. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that inspires, comforts, and uplifts people around the world. Thank you for being here. And until next time, take care of your mind, be gentle with your heart, and remember that peace begins one moment at a time.